Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we are still continuing on our chapter 4 of our book, Positive Islamic Psychology, a transcendent model to achieve peace, happiness and success in the 21st century. And we are discussing today the subtopic of why, treatment of mental illnesses fail. Because as I mentioned earlier on in our previous video, we are looking at a very materialistic approach towards the problem of our mind. No doubt, if we can take a physical approach to the problem of our physical body, for example, our lungs, our heart, our kidney and so on, it has a relationship to the higher forms of existence, our consciousness, under the science of epigenetics. But if you talk about the nature of the mind, where it is an interaction at a higher level, that means at the spiritual, emotional, mental level, the SEM level, where it is linked directly to our inner consciousness, our inner nature, and our connection of ourself within ourselves, our connection to our surroundings, the environment, and a connection to the ultimate, that is the universal truth, Allah, at the highest level. So all these are supra-conscious. That means it's beyond our level of things. You're talking about consciousness, and again the definition of consciousness today, they are still arguing, they have not reached any level. But if you talk about the mind and mental illnesses, these are problems or situational conditions in terms of the environment, the changes in terms of personality, the language and so on, that is affecting that person, and you call him mentally having a mental problem, mental disease or mental problems. But that is the nature of an imbalance in terms of our self, in terms of our thinking at the conscious mind, conscious level, subconscious and supraconscious connection. So there is a higher level of thinking within the Islamic perspective. That's why when we treat mental illnesses today using just secular materialistic methodology of drugs and so on, it is not going to work in a proper sense. Yes, it works to a certain extent. For example, we know that CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, works to a certain extent, but CBT is also based on the understanding of, it's like a talk therapy, it's not a chemical therapy. So it's a more of trying to change the mindset of that person to overcome their current neurosis or psychosis or whatever that is in relation to their existing problem, existential problem of their life, the challenges they are facing within their life and so on. So how do we then define this? So I'm just going to give you one or two paragraphs from Professor Muhammad Nawabudin-Jenkins of his definition. What is about this, why treatment of mental illnesses fail? Many people already suffering the anguish of mental illnesses have died during what is claimed to be treatment. So even treatment in the good old days where they lead the blood or they beat the person to death because he is a witch or possessed by jinn and so on. So they beat that person until that person dies. All right? Or even today they have this, even in the 20th century, they have the electroconvulsive therapy using electric shock. The people die of it. All right? Now maybe it is less severe than that, but in the rural areas, in many parts of the world, whether it's within the Muslim or non-Muslim, whether it is within the culture of India, Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever, there has exorcism. They try to get rid of the spirit, but the way it is done is brutal and very, very oppressive. So that's why we have to be very careful in that mode of trying to solve the problem of mental illnesses. There are many instances of mentally ill person being equally mistreated in the 21st century. There are still mentally people dying while undergoing what is claimed to be treatment in the world today. The nature and origin and the cure of mental illnesses are still poorly understood. So it is very poorly understood. In a world society so sick as ours, where in the true sense we are all suffering from mental illnesses. So all of us is suffering from mental illnesses, because from the perspective of Professor Mahdi-Jenkins, we are living in an insane century, an insane society. This 21st century is insane and getting more insane by the day. So naturally we are affected by insanity, whether we like it or not, to a higher or a little degree. But that doesn't mean that we cannot function. Functionally, alhamdulillah, we can function, but we've got to help others who cannot function in the normal scheme of their existential life in this earth. So in a world so sick as ours, where the true sense in a true sense, we are all suffering from mental diseases or illnesses. It's only to be expected that the understanding and treatment of problems of the mind would be notably less than adequate. Therefore, little is known even about normal functions of mind, and there has been little basis to understand the mind when it goes wrong. I'll start by explaining mental illnesses as it has been recently described. Very broadly, mental illnesses can be thought to fall into two categories. They are neurosis and psychosis. Of the two, neurosis is usually less severe, while psychosis include the major expression of mental illnesses is more severe. There are a range of behaviors and thoughts which are considered to be neurosis, and there are certain thoughts that is considered to be psychosis. So I'm just going to give it to you some understanding. All right. So when we talk about neurosis, there are many forms of neurosis, especially as we are trying to develop our positive Islamic cognitive behavior therapy. We are trying to tackle more of the neurosis type of problem, because they are like anxiety disorder, phobias, obsessive compulsive behavior, OCD, depression, eating disorder, just like anorexia, nausea, bulimia. And this actually has less severity in the sense that in neurosis, the personality change is, there is a change in personality, there's a change in terms of behavior, there's a change in terms of understanding the reality, there's a change in terms of the language use, expression of the language, there's a change in belief system, and so many other things that's affecting that person who has either neurosis or psychosis. But the intensity and the functionality at the neurosis level, the person is still to a certain extent functional in their life. For example, if they have suicidal tendency, it's a neurosis, but they still have this idea of wanting to kill themselves, but they still have not killed themselves. So there is a way in which we can tackle that problem. All right. For example, phobias. People have phobias, but they still can function in society. But with psychosis, these people are delusional. That means a higher level of personality change has happened to such an extent that they cannot function normally in society. And sometimes it can be very dangerous. So some psychopathic are very dangerous. They are the mass murderers, the mass killers. They are psychopathic. All right. They have delusional, ideation. They have hallucination. And they have lost the understanding of reality. What is reality to them is in their own world, so their own understanding. So example of psychosis would be schizophrenia, maniac depressive psychosis, dissociative identity disorder. And psychosis can be, we can define psychosis in three major branches. For example, this is, for example, like functional psychosis. These are like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and related disorders. Organic, these are we having problems in terms of the brain structure itself, brain tumor or chemical imbalance, insofar as it could even be diet, food, it could be even exposure to industrial chemicals and many other things that's causing this kind of problem, or exposure to war chemicals, which is happening to a lot of soldiers in, for example, after the Iraq War, the Vietnam War, and so on, Agent Orange, and so on, that cause psychosis. And they have the other thing is affecting now more and more young people is the psychoactive drug. All right, so you have psychosis being affected by heroin, cocaine, marijuana, for example, artificial drugs like amphetamine, barbiturates, and so many of the other new forms of chemically induced psychosis that is very dangerous. So more and more young people are going into this kind of situational condition, and a lot of them finally have their brain literally damaged. That means if you go to the MRI, you scan their brain, you can see part of the brain already dead. So when that situation happens, the chance of that person getting out to have a normal life is very slim, because in the process of taking of the psychoactive drugs and so on, they are literally destroying their brain. For example, in the poor countries, they are sniffing glue. And you know the glue, the complex organics within the glue itself is so toxic to the brain. And if this child start at age of 7, by the time they are 14 or 15, they have the full range of psychosis, and there's no way that they can function as normal human beings. And these are the realities that's happening throughout the world. Maybe in the richer countries like in America or in Canada and so on, they can have a higher level of other drugs like marijuana or analog of drugs that are from the chemical type of drugs. It's also causing severe problem in terms of suicide, in terms of problems in terms of functionality within society and so on. So whatever that we do today, all right, if we say we take society as a whole in the 21st century and we compare to society maybe in the earlier centuries, for example, are we more mad or are we mentally more disordered than them or what? But the best judge is for us to see how we can resolve this issue of how we can have successful treatment in terms of mental disorders, in terms of psychosis and neurosis, and how we can tackle this from the perspective of higher thinking. That's why when we talk about Islamic psychology, we also have to go back into the understanding of Islamic psychiatry. That means our medical doctors trained as psychiatrists must be able to understand that at a higher level, whatever neurosis and psychosis, all this goes back to the belief system. I believe that the key to the solution of solving all mental problems is a change in terms of the belief system. If you have a very strong belief system on your reliance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and all the methodology trained by our great alim, our great ulama, our great scholars, they have brought this idea of a natural balance for us to lead a good life, for us to understand our purpose and meaning in life, for us to have as little as possible these mental disturbances, whether it's neurosis or psychosis. And inshallah, if we can do more research in this area, both from the perspective of positive Islamic cognitive behavior therapy and also the range of understanding the chemical balances, as well as the linkage with our spirituality, that means our roh, our qalb and our akal, and bring it together as a holistic approach to help solve the problem of mental illnesses in the world, then we have contributed something to the world, inshallah, and bring about a wonderful, at least within the Ummah of Islam, a wonderful approach towards a balance, a holistic lifestyle, balanced mentality within the framework of peace, happiness and success, understanding our role to be the sincere and servants of Allah, always striving to make ourselves good, helping others to be good and making the world good, inshallah.